Welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan.
Who are you? Mr. Ryan, we're indoors. It's bleak midwinter, as Shakespeare may have said. And you know what I'm not feeling?
What aren't you feeling?
I'm not feeling tropical.
Funnily enough, hence the fire, hence the indoors. But
Yes.
we can always make our garden feel tropical.
Can we?
Yes.
Even in a cool or a cold climate?
And that's the topic of today, is to give you a tropical-esque look in a garden that isn't anywhere near tropical.
Which is certainly the case today.
Yes.
Lead on, Macduff.
All right, let's go.
Oh, and here we are in Bali, in Hawaii. I don't know. And viewers, we were just inside Stephen's living room, and this is the door. This is the vista from your living room. It is freezing, and yet this looks like Brazil.
It does, and it's all in how you use the plants and what you plant. So you obviously have to pick things that are going to be climate appropriate,
Yep.
but there's plenty of tropical-esque plants out there that will do the job admirably. So I've got some things that are borderline that might get knocked down by heavy frost occasionally, but
Yep.
otherwise the plants I've used are basically cool to cold climate plants,
Yep.
but they evoke the tropics.
And what is it about them, you think, that evokes the tropics?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is there are certain plants that are just classically tropical
Yep.
seeming. Palm trees, for instance.
Yes.
Say. Giant leafed things always evoke the tropics. You can see yourself fighting your way through the jungle.
Even tree ferns, which aren't necessarily tropical,
Yeah,
but they
there are
look as though they should be.
There are plenty of tropical ones, but there are certainly
okay.
cool climate ones. So the ones we have around here, which are native to the area, so therefore perfectly adapted to my tropical garden, aren't really tropical, they're temperate. But they feel tropical. And it might even be the fact that the tree ferns have a palm-esque look. So
Right.
that could be part of it as well.
Okay.
And then there's just the big, gutsy, giant leafed things, which really do the job. And then it's a matter of combining them. And one of the things you have to do if you want to get a tropical look is to completely cover the ground. You want to
Yes.
have things cheek by jowl so that it has that sort of tropical feel to it. So you won't see the mulch, you won't see the garden around it,
Nope.
and the plants will be fighting it out together because that's what you expect of the tropics, really.
Indeed, indeed. And the other point which we'll show our viewers is that you've got a pond here, so a bit of hard landscaping and water.
Yeah.
To me, water is also suggesting the tropics. All of this is nonsense, really, isn't it? But it's very suggestive,
It is.
emotionally suggestive.
Gardening is all about that. I mean, really, when you think about it...
Smoke and mirrors.
Well, yes, it is, because we plant a garden with the idea that we're evoking nature, when in fact we're doing something that's completely and
Very
utterly not
contrived.
natural.
Yeah.
So gardening as a whole is like that. And so to create a tropical effect, or to create, I don't know, an alpine scree in your garden...
I long for alpine screes.
Yeah, so,
Not today.
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of different ways you can evoke different feelings and also make a comfortable home for certain styles of plant.
Okay, well, I think we need to go plant by plant around this area and just explain why you've chosen it and what their characteristics are.
Where do we start?
Well, good question. Over here.
Right, let's go.
Mr. Ryan, I know size matters. Is
Yes.
this the biggest Aspidistra in the world?
No, unfortunately, but I certainly wish it was, because
Now-
it's a great foliage plant.
So, Aspidistra. George Orwell wrote about Aspidistra, not directly.
Gracie Field sang about Aspidistra.
It's a cliche.
It is a cliche
Why is it here?
because it does the job. It's drought tolerant, it's shade tolerant, and it has big, gutsy leaves. And as I said, I'd be happy if they were even bigger, but it does the job. So it's filling up the ground, it's growing right up to the trunks of some of my trees,
Yep.
so you can't see any soil. And so, yes, it's a very amenable and useful plant.
Isn't it a slow grower, though? Did it take a long time to make this clump?
Yes. It is slow growing.
Your tropical garden, you'll need patience.
Yeah, well, you will with some things. Some things are almost overnight,
Yeah.
but certain plants like the Aspidistra, which I can remember as a child used to grow in a jardiniere at every barber shop.
Everyone.
You hardly ever see it grown anymore. Yes, it takes a little time to build up quantity, but sometimes you can pick it up on the roadside rubbish dumps and bring it home.
You can, and you often find it at flea markets and
Yeah, car boot sales.
because people often cultivate it.
Yeah.
And there are some quite fancy hybrids now, aren't there?
Oh, yeah,
with-
yeah, some amazing spotty
speckled-
leafed ones
yeah,
and
yeah.
stripy leafed ones, and they're
Now,
a thing.
Where's it from?
Well, the Aspidistras are Asian, so Japan, China, that
Yeah.
sort of area, Korea, I think, as well. And they're forest plants, so they grow in the forests. But they don't grow in tropical forests, they grow in cool to temperate forests.
So, hardiness question then.
Pretty tough.
Can they take frost?
They can take a fair bit of frost, but of course you're growing them in the shade of other plants
Which
because
protects
they don't
them.
like the sun, and that does tend to protect them to a degree from the frost.
I would not have thought it was a hardy plant.
It is. It's quite tough.
Could someone in England plant this outside?
Southern England, yes. I would doubt that it would grow well once you start getting into central and northern areas.
And if it does get a bit frost affected, is it a rhizome?
Yes, so it will come back again.
As long as it's not too severe.
But of course, being slowish growing, it will take time to come back. So you might actually meet yourself coming with the next frost. So it's not necessarily something you want to do.
It's a dry shade lover, drought tolerant, and frost
tolerant.
Frost tolerant, that's the word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go.
On to the next.
All right. This bamboo we covered in our bamboo segment we did. We will put the link above. This bamboo is Indocalamus tessellatus, which is a bit of a mouthful. But it is a fabulous bamboo and well worthwhile growing. Keep in mind it is a running one. And it's a huge leafed bamboo, so it's very tropical looking, and it arches over things, so again it hides the ground and makes everything look verdant and green. And it's growing right up to the base of this wonderful Dicksonia antarctica, the southern tree fern that is native to our area. And even in the tree fern there's a bromeliad growing, giving you that Brazilian feel with epiphytes growing in the garden. This particular species of bamboo prefers to grow in semi-shade to shade. It will tend to burn if it goes out into too much sun. So give it a shady aspect. If it's in dry shade, that will control its avaristic nature. And it's, as far as I know, perfectly cold hardy. It comes from cold parts of China, so it should be able to be growable in most cold parts of the world. It probably won't like the tropics.
Tree ferns, lush, tropical. Yes. But where's this one from?
Well, this one's a local one.
Yep.
So it comes from the mountains of Victoria, Tasmania, all through those sort of southern parts of Australia.
It is beautiful. What's the name of this one?
This one is Dicksonia antarctica, meaning of the Antarctic, which of course it isn't going to be seen growing down there.
No.
Anyhow.
But Dicksonia, that rings a bell.
Yes, it's the name of my nursery. I actually named my nursery after this tree fern. Yes.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about growing conditions. Yours is, God, how tall is that? That's about 7 foot tall, or about 2 meters, 2.5 meters.
Yep.
How long's that taken?
I bought it that big.
Cheat!
No, it's
Cheat.
not. If you're going to plant a tree fern...
I'm outraged.
No, you shouldn't be. They are so slow growing. They only put on, at least with the Dicksonias, they only put on a very tiny amount per year.
Yeah.
And so if you want one that you can walk under, you basically have to buy one you can walk under. And so you buy it by the foot.
Unless you're a 5-year-old wanting to walk under it when you're 75.
Yeah, well, exactly. So although many of my tree ferns have been in the garden here for 2 decades or thereabouts, they have grown taller, but it's still marginal. So you need to buy a tree fern of an appropriate size if you're going to plant one.
So that's your advice, to buy an existing one. And I guess to clarify, because effectively the trunk is the root system,
Yep.
so when you buy them, they're cut off and there is no root ball as you would imagine.
Not on the Dicksonias. Some other tree ferns can't be, in fact, cut off and sold, so we probably should, we might even have to do a tree fern thing at some point or another.
Okay, maybe we will. So let's not go into too much information, but let's say for the sake of tropical landscaping, depending on what you want to achieve, you're better off buying an established one.
Oh yes, certainly with the Dicksonias. Buy an established trunk. Remember to allow enough so that you can bury it into the ground so that it will be vertical and won't keep falling over. There you go. It's sort of instant effect. It will send out its fronds fairly quickly after you purchase the trunk. Yeah, it gives an instant wham.
And they're also reasonably available. I mean, they weren't, but they now are in Britain. They're easy to buy in Britain.
Not cheap, though.
Not cheap.
Yes, they're fairly expensive when you buy them in those places, and they should always have attached a certificate because they're taken out of the wild, so they have to be taken from places where roads are being widened or things where they're going to be destroyed anyway.
Sustainably removed.
Yes, well, supposedly. I hope they are, but you wonder sometimes.
Yes. And do you think they're available in North America as well?
Yes, I'm sure you can buy tree ferns in North America, again, at a price.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. And what else do I see beside you that's looking very tropical?
Now, Fatsia, which is a Japanese plant, grows in quite cold climates, perfectly hardy in gardens in England and North America. It has a wonderful big tropical-like leaf. It's very popular as an indoor plant, so you can buy it and grow it as an indoor plant.
Yep.
I remember it as a child, actually, when indoor plants went through one of their multiple phases, and you'd always see a Fatsia or a rubber tree in people's houses, and they'd be in one of those lovely bright-coloured anodised pots.
Yes.
Yes.
But I seem to, you've got a variegated one, have you not?
Yes, I have. I've got a different form which is well worthwhile having a look at.
Well, let's go and look at that.
All right, what a good idea.
And is this the variegated one?
It's one of the variegated ones. This one goes under the rather unimaginative name of Fatsia japonica variegata. And you can see it looks like the ends of some of the leaf areas have been dipped in cream paint. And so it just gives it that added little sort of oomph, I think. And if you go to the tropics, particularly to tropical gardens, there are lots of coloured leaf plants. So I think things with coloured leaves can also give you that sense of tropicalness.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, how would you use a Fatsia in your landscaping? Because it's, I mean, what are we calling it? It's a small shrub?
No, it's a large shrub.
Okay. It's a large shrub.
Yeah, and it can grow to almost small tree proportions.
Right, I have seen old ones.
Yeah, so they can get quite large. Having said that, they're eminently prunable.
Right.
So if it gets bigger than you want or grows out wider than you want, so you can actually create what you want with it. You can, if it gets too big, you can cut it right back hard and start it off again.
Yeah.
So it's a very adaptable plant.
So you'd be using this to kind of create a sense of a tropical canopy.
Yes.
Leafy, loose.
Yeah, it brings you up to the next level. I mean, everything we've spoken about thus far, apart from the tree ferns, have been sort of lower understory plants. This will bring it up to the next level. But in a jungle, of course, you have lots of levels. So you need to be able to feel the sense of looking up into taller things yet again as well.
Indeed, indeed. Hardiness for this and
tough as
requirement, yes.
Very, very hardy.
So it'll take...
The only trouble with Fatsias is they're not sun tolerant.
Right.
So they'll cope with an inordinately deep shady spot. They'll cope with dry conditions. They will cope with very low temperatures.
Yep.
They can be grown in a huge range of places, and you can whip them into the house and they'll probably cope with your central heating as well.
Okay. All right. On to the next.
Why not indeed? All right, behind my little fish pond, we have one of the, generally called elephant's ears, but there's lots of unrelated plants that are called that. This is one of the aroids, one of the Alocasias. And it will get frosted here, but it will come away again in the spring. Fortunately, this winter we haven't had a heavy enough frost to deal it a death blow, but it is in fact doing really well, and it makes that sort of lovely sort of pond edge type thing. I have to say though, the pond is quite small, the plant is quite large. There is no sense of scale here, but that doesn't matter because we want the tropicalness, and it's more important. Behind it, you can see that I've got one of the Australian native palms growing over there, one of the Livistonas, doing exceedingly well and will eventually grow quite tall. So it will also become a part of the upper canopy, which includes, of course, my giant timber bamboo, which is just behind me. It's one of the Phyllostachys, and it must be a good 10 metres tall now. Probably will get taller yet with its huge big dark green culms. It is just the most fabulous bamboo. It's a running bamboo, Phyllostachys bambusoides, which is its full name, but so far mine has shown no propensity to run. It will one day, hopefully when I'm too old to bother. Another plant that often evokes a tropical feel, even though it's not, because it's a New Zealand native plant, is the Cordyline or cabbage palm. And this particular one is getting quite tall now. It's a variegated leafed one, which I think evokes the tropics as well. It will eventually get to 8 to 10 metres tall, so, up to 30 feet tall, and it will get multiple trunks in time, and it will be fighting it out in here with everything else. Cordylines are one of those things that are used in places like southern England to pretend they're on the Riviera. So you can go to Eastbourne and see cordylines, but you might not see them further north. And cordylines are interesting plants. They grow much more wispy in the shade, but they will tolerate shade quite well, as this one is doing. They're probably better out in full sun. They become thicker, heavier, gutsier looking plants in that sort of aspect. This is Phyllostachys bambusoides.
Bambusoides?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
It's a fantastic bamboo, but it isn't for the faint of heart. It's very big growing and potentially running.
What a great form it has, and it's the perfect foil for tropical plants.
I think so, and it makes fantastic stakes for the vegetable garden as well.
They're amazing. And while we're here, this, to me, is a large leaf. It evokes the tropics. What is this?
This is a weird plant from Madeira. It used to be called Melanoselinum decipiens.
Oof.
It has had a name change recently. It's now Daucus decipiens.
Right.
And I will do a proper profile on this at some stage, but it's a monocarp, which means it flowers and dies, but it lives for years. It evokes the tropics even though it doesn't come from the tropics. So it's a wonderful plant.
And obviously it's able to cope in your climate, which has Occasional frost.
Occasional frost. It seems to be, I would say, moderately hardy to the cold.
And to your left, sir, is a bird's nest fern.
Yes, which is an Australian / Pacific Islands native. They are wonderful textural plants, and in the wild you don't generally see them growing in the ground like this. You see them growing as epiphytes up in trees.
Ah, right.
So,
and what does it prefer in terms of conditions?
it doesn't like frost, so it needs to be sheltered from the frost. It will go down to low temperatures though, quite happily. It likes a little bit of shade, but it likes high light levels. It likes a little bit of moisture, but it doesn't like to get wet, and it doesn't like to get dry.
Sounding a bit finicky.
Well, no, it's actually just giving it average conditions, basically, in a way. So it's not that bad. Once you find a spot for it, it will live there for decades, perfectly happy with probably minimal attention.
Aha.
All right, let's just go through the points one by one. If you're going to try and create a tropical border, of course make sure that you select plants that are at least hardy in your climate. Look for things that have a tropical look to them, so things like bamboos, palms and ferns are all very, very good subjects for this sort of work. And also things with large platy leaves. That has a sort of a tropical exuberance about it. Make sure that the ground's all covered, because you don't want to be able to see open ground, so plant densely. And also make sure that you look at the layering. So you need things down at ground level, you need things that are sort of moderately sort of waist height and higher, and then you need some tall towering things to make that sort of jungly feel. So that's basically the facts that you'll need to create that wonderful tropical border. So what do you think, Matthew?
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. We do post every week, so hit subscribe if you want to hear of our continuing adventures, and we look forward to seeing you next week.